Well, hello, friends. Trisha Goyer here, and I have a new friend. I'm so excited to get to know her better. I am loving her book right now, and I'm laughing because there's some really cute, funny parts, which I'm sure we're going to talk about. But I have Janine Rosche here, and we're talking about her book, The Road Before Us. I had to get the words right, The Road Before Us. But welcome, Janine.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, why don't you just start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, well, I am an Ohio mother of four. I've lived all over the country, but Ohio is kind of my home. This is my sixth book. I have not been writing too terribly long, about 10 years, other than writing. I like to write women's fiction and romance. All of the stories that I write and read have to have some element of romance in it, but I've also found that I can't really write lighthearted books too well. And so a lot of my books have a lot of heavy topics.
Hmm.
And I think I get that because in my day job, I teach family life education courses and family classes and relationship classes, marriage classes. And so I like to take a lot of the issues that we face in our day to day relationships and put them into a fictionalized form, hopefully, help people feel like they're not alone in whatever they're going through. And then also incorporating a faith element into that. Because I don't know about you, but whenever I'm going through something in my life, like I can't separate the faith aspect of it. And so it's pretty ingrained in my characters' lives as well.
Yeah, I love it. And I will say that there are those deeper topics, which we'll talk about in a second. But right from the beginning, there is this heartedness. How would you say that? Lightheartedness of it, where I'm like, oh my goodness, okay, this character, I really love her. And then so you start kind of like in the middle of the story or near the end of the
I do.
story. And
Yes.
then we
Yes.
jump back a year, and then you're like, wait, how acting here is very different than how she's acting here. So we know we're going to be on a journey, which we know it's about Route 66,
Hmm.
which I love. And I love that you did that because, she's a little bit uptight at that where the story started and where
Oh,
she
yeah.
is when the book started. I'm like, okay, girl, what's going on? I want to know more. So tell us about that, like your decision to introduce the character kind of like partway through and then take us back to how she got there.
Well, okay, so it started that, even though this book is a standalone novel, this character Jade, who is one of my main heroines, she was actually in my last book with
Oh,
Every
okay.
Memory, and a lot of people did not like her in that book. She is a stepping stone, or maybe I should say stumbling block, in
Mhm.
that story, and people did not like her very much. And so I knew people who had read that book were going to come into this one and they were going to already have something, a
An
thought
opinion about
against
her.
her.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And so I knew I had to break that apart a little bit, but then also go back. So you see her, and she is walking down a road along Route 66 in a small town in Arizona. You can tell something big has happened. She's wearing short shorts, cowboy
Daisy
boots,
Dukes. They
Daisy Dukes, which she even says she would never be wearing, but some things have happened and this is the outfit that she's stuck in, and she's walking to a small two-cell jail and having to bust out or bail out the hero. And we don't know what's happened, we don't know why it's happened, but we know that they are somewhere in the middle of the country. Something has gone wrong, and there's somebody that they both care about very much. Her name is Benny, and that's where you start off. And then you jump backwards a year and you pick up right outside Chicago, a Chicago high rise where Route 66 begins. And she's in her business attire and she's walking with her fiance, and they're going up to their financial management firm. and you get the sense like, okay, something has happened
Something has
because
definitely happened if this is the same person who we just saw
right.
in that jail scene, and now and then what she did with that car, I mean, I'm not gonna yeah, it was just like, "Oh, this girl has some smarts in her," which again, when we actually start the book with her in the high rise, like, okay, yeah, I wanna know this story because I wanna know how she got from point A to point B along
Yeah.
Route 66, which is so fun, and, so I've been on Route 66. I brought my mom home. She moved from California to Arkansas, and there's a part of it that's on Route 66. And I'm like, this is going to be so cool. And then we drove trying to find a restaurant, and we're like, this is really weird. There's parts of the country that I don't know if this is even safe driving here. So immediately, because I have this in my mind, these small towns, they're famous because they're on the route, but you're like, let's keep driving. I don't think we should stop in this town, and that's where she oh, those the balloons went up. And that's where she started in the town. Like, it's like I could picture it so perfectly. Like,
Oh,
so let's
I'm
talk about
so
that a little
glad.
bit, like the Route 66, because we all hear about it, but unless
Mhm.
you're on it, you're like, "Oh, wait, this is not what I pictured at all."
It's really hard to imagine it, and every section of it is completely different. Where
Yeah.
you were when you first started, you probably picked it up in Oklahoma, I'm guessing,
Yeah.
maybe Missouri. I mean, it's completely different than the New Mexico and Arizona part, then California is its own world.
Right.
So, yeah, it's quite different and quite interesting.
Yeah, there's parts like this is like almost a ghost town, except it would be a ghost town if it wasn't on Route 66 that
Mhm.
somehow people want to drive it because it's famous. And then you're like, wow, why am I on this road? Like, this is interesting. Yeah. So
Yes, yes.
I would love to hear why you picked this for the Journey Road because it seems like there's something in the dedication that's like,
Mhm.
I want to hear the story behind the story about this.
Yeah, so my father, when he graduated high school back in 1961, he was going out to California to join the Air Force. And after basic training, he drove from Syracuse, New York, across to Chicago. And then he took Route 66 all the way down to Southern California. And once he got there, he had a convertible and he would cruise Maine. He he had a huge oversized teddy bear that he kept in his passenger seat
Oh
to
my
try
goodness.
to pick up the girls, and it worked because he met my mom, and that is
Wow.
where their love story started, this New York guy and this, young California girl, and Route 66 brought them together. He's always told me about that journey down Route 66. I mean, imagine being 18 years old, driving by yourself, and back then in 1961 when there was no interstate and there
Mhm.
you couldn't reserve hotel rooms, you had to sleep in your car if there were no vacancies. I mean, it was a completely different world than, when you travel today. And my father unfortunately passed away 9 years ago, and this I wanted to write a Route 66
Mm.
story to honor him and honor my parents' love story, and this was the perfect opportunity. So yeah, I'm glad you brought up the dedication says, for mom and dad, thanks to Route 66, you found each other once. I pray you'll find each other again, this time on streets paved with gold.
Oh, yeah.
Um, and a lot of what it's not based on my parents' love story, but there are certain
Mhm.
elements that really coincide with my mom now being a widow and looking forward to the day when she can see my father again. And then always having this Route 66 memory of them, first falling in love. It's kind of an homage to the 1960s and that Route 66 culture in my parents as well.
I love that because we have Benny, who is this very popular film star or very well known in Hollywood. And she is connected with Jade in a very unfortunate circumstance that happens. And then she has, is it her adopted son, foster son, whatever
Her
son,
foster son,
foster
yes.
son is just there. And so, talk a little bit about the setup of this. We don't want to give too much away, but I think the setup is important to see how these three people end up together. And Jade has faced trauma, but as we're going along, we see that there has been trauma that she kind of just has not dealt with because. Anyway, why don't you explain? Because I'm trying to explain and not doing a good job.
Well, it is this is by far the most complicated story that I've
Yeah,
written,
but
and
it's so good though. So I'll just say
yeah,
that.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of issues. Every chapter, you're seeing a different history or historical part of America,
Hmm.
and it influences and affects each of the characters in a different way. I mean, it's a loaded story. So I'm just want to there are several sensitivity warnings that I give as well because like I said, I don't shy
Hmm.
away from hard topics. I just try to redeem them in some
Hmm.
way. With the faith element and just the humanity element. But basically, this story is a multi generational story. And so it takes place in three different eras. You have 1956, you have 2003, and then you have modern day. And some of those characters overlap. So the 1956 story is about Benny, her name is Bernice, but they call her Benny, and she is this innocent, naive, excited for life girl who wants to leave Chicago and she wants to go to Los Angeles and become a famous Hollywood actress.
Hmm.
And her brother's best friend who served in the war in the Korean War with her brother says, "Well, you don't know the evil that's in this world. So I'm going to drive you to California. I want to make sure that you're safe." You know that although they face a lot of trials on that journey, that they do fall in love because when you see them in the modern day story, they have had this amazing life together, this amazing, career. Both of them
Mhm.
becoming. I kind of base them off of Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward. Just this
Yeah.
long enduring love story where they're both Hollywood stars in their own right, but have made a big impact in the world. And so you have her. She has recently lost Paul, her husband, who she falls in love with on Route 66 once, and now it's modern day, and she has basically told Paul she's nearing 90 and she says, before I meet you in heaven, they were both ill at the same time. She says, "You go on ahead, but before I come with you, I need to set some things right." And so she wants to donate their money to all these different causes that have meant a lot to them. And you see those causes throughout the story. But also, they have this foster son who has been through so much trauma in his 31 years. He is a Samoan born man.
Yeah.
Are you laughing?
I just keep laughing because he's so great. Like he's a such a fun character. Like you just fall in love with him literally from the beginning. I don't know.
He
Like
is. Oh
yeah.
my goodness. I love writing just happy-go-lucky, fun heroes. And I'd shied away from that for a few books. So this was a homecoming for me having him, but you would never know how much trauma he had been through.
Mhm. Mhm.
His story is based off of something that my family went through, which was we had tried to adopt through Ethiopia back in 2012, and there was a huge adoption scandal that involved
Mm.
our agency. We lost a ton of money from it, but fortunately, we never had gone through and actually brought a child home. Well, in 2003 in Samoa, a similar scandal had happened where these children were taken from their parents under false pretenses, brought to either Australia or the United States, basically kidnapped from their families. And the people who you know, masterminded this whole scheme, who did it for money, they barely got a slap on the wrist. And
Wow.
a lot of those adoptees, they struggled and their families struggled. I met one of these adoptees from that and heard her story, and it really just did put flesh on the character that I
Mhm.
was
Mhm.
writing, and took something that I could only research and made me realize this is actually something that a
Right.
trauma that people
Yeah.
had gone
Yeah.
through. But you would never know that because he has this joyful energy and he would do anything to protect Benny, his foster mom, the one woman who took him in and cared for him the way that he should be loved. Um, and he knows that she's not doing well. And then at the same time, she's like, well, I need to make sure he is set up and he is ready to survive without me so that I can pass on and go up and be reunited with Paul in heaven. But all of her money is lost in a Ponzi scheme. And Jade and her fiance were part of that. Jade, unwillingly, as this financial manager, had brought Benny and her husband into a Ponzi scheme that her fiance did. She had no idea, completely innocent in it, but she can't shake that guilt. So
Mhm.
she offers to drive cross country back down Route 66 with Bridger and Benny. And they're going to make a documentary about Benny's love story with Paul, hope to recoup some of that money that was lost. And of course, it's not as easy as they think it's going to be. There's a lot of guilt, there's a lot of trauma. Jade remembers and starts dealing with the fact that she has driven Route 66 once before, back in 2003, when she was kidnapped by her non custodial father
Mhm.
in a very traumatic way. So you have all of these people's traumatic stories coming together, and I try to keep it light. And fortunately, Route 66 provides such a fun, kitschy atmosphere where there are lighthearted moments. So that's how I tried to balance it all.
Yeah, and I would say, like, to hear you describe it, like, "Oh, this sounds like a really depressing book." But it isn't. Like, I mean, there are the issues in it, but, I mean, I was smiling and laughing and, like, it's told in a very lighthearted way. Even the trauma stuff with Bridger, because even though there's trauma happening, just his lightheartedness, just like, okay, this is a bad situation, but okay, like we're gonna be okay. I don't know how to explain it, but so it's
Yes.
very, very well done. Where you are talking about the issues, you are tackling things, you are talking about hard situations. I mean, Benny being close to death and just as her last hurrah, but it's also when you have the interactions with the characters and unexpected things happening and it makes it not a heavy read, so you can touch on the heavy subjects and they do come up because there are scenes like with her dad. I mean, there are the scenes there, but then we're jumping into him standing on his head in an elevator like or whatever, so then you're like, okay, we're in a no anyway. So it's all that to say, if you're like, oh, I don't like depressing books, I would not have said it's a depressing book, although there's hard subjects, so just that to
Yes.
say.
Yes, I tried to balance it all well, and, I love the way that it came out. There's a strong theme of family, and
Mhm.
that family is who you want it to be. Not everybody was born with the perfect family. Um, there is a beautiful theme of adoption in this story. We eventually did adopt a daughter, who is, our world along with her three brothers. And, in a weird way, Route 66 has this way of adopting its travelers. And it's
Mhm.
funny because, John Steinbeck called it the mother road back in Grapes of Wrath. And it fits because people who have traveled Route 66 since the 1920s, even before it became an actual established highway, people had traveled it for so many different reasons. They traveled it to find something, to start fresh, to escape something, to figure out who they are. Everybody has a reason why they've traveled this road, and the mother road really does just kind of adopt all of us in and provide this refuge and this safe haven, a place to figure out who you are and what you want. It's just and then you have Benny who has taken in Bridger and been the mother to him that he lost so many, decades ago. And it's a really beautiful story. And it comes, I mean, oh, my greatest fears are written into this story. As an adoptive mom,
Mhm.
of somebody who has lost their parents. I mean, it
Mhm.
is it my fears are in there, but my hopes are in there, and everything that I've kind of learned on my own journey down Route 66. I tried to put it all together, and hopefully readers will enjoy it.
Yeah, so good. So we have adopted 7 kids. So we have
Oh,
3.
I had no
Yeah,
idea.
so we have 3 biological and we have 7 adopted. We
Oh
adopted
my
a
goodness.
newborn, and then we adopted a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old from foster care, and then a sibling group of 4 girls from foster care who were 11, 13, 13, and 15. And
Mhm.
so, like, the adoption themes, all the caring for each other and families, all those themes is just that maybe that's why I love this book too so much. So, it's just so many good things in it, but I will say, like, um even when you are adopt a family, like, every holiday is different, every birthday is different, like, there's just a different level of just it's not just, "Oh, it's your birthday." It's like, "Oh, it's coming up to your birthday." Like, you're probably gonna be thinking about your biological mom. You're probably gonna there's so many layers to it, and then I
Mhm.
love that you were able to explore layers, not just with memories, but going back and actually taking us to the scenes in the layers. And so you're able to show, like, okay, this is why this character is like this now, because these are some things that happened in the past. And I think that is
Mhm.
always very revealing. And I think that was just adopting kids from foster care, older kids from foster care, I would be like, why are holidays so traumatic? Like, we're
Yeah.
doing well. And she's like, because, like, not only has there been difficult holidays in their past, but there has also been really great holidays in their past. And they have a hard time when you're children reconciling all of it. And so I love that through scenes in the book, you're able to just help us see that sometimes the outward expressions of who we are now are because of things in the past.
Mhm. Yes, absolutely. One of the big things that I touch on, and I was very hesitant to write a Samoan character. I am not from
Yeah.
Samoa.
Yeah.
I knew I wouldn't be able to portray that, and he doesn't have a point of view, but I still wanted to make him very realistic.
Mhm.
But I knew I wouldn't be able to write a character who was born and raised in a country across the world from me. And one of the things that he deals with is okay, he finally was accepted by this white couple in California, Benny and Paul, and he tries to distance himself from his birth culture because
Mhm.
he is so afraid that he is going to hurt them by
Mhm.
making it seem like he's not appreciative. And it's that is my daughter is a different race than I am, and that is my biggest fear as a mom is that she would ever shun her birth culture because she didn't want to hurt my feelings.
Mhm.
So that's something that they Jade actually helps them work through in the story. But yeah, it's complex, and trying to write a story of something that my daughter may feel one day in the future. Oh, it
Yeah.
really, yeah, it was very close to my heart.
Yeah, but I think one of the things that helped us as an adoptive family, I loved, the book, Jenny B. Jones did the Katie Parker series. In Between is the first book, and it's about a foster girl showing up, and she is all that she's mad at her foster parents, like, they're doing everything right, and she's mad about this, mad about that, and they're like, "I feel that way too," and I would read it out loud to them, and being able to see these things in fiction, I think sometimes for us has opened up conversations about things. So I'm like, ooh, after I finish reading this book, this will be a good one. Like, what do you think about this? Have you ever had those thoughts? Because sometimes they're not even trying to like able to figure out what they're feeling, but if they see it like in a character in a novel, then they're like, oh yeah, I felt that way, or oh, actually, I didn't feel like that, but it made me think of this. And so I found with my kids that fiction, while I have those worries and fears and I don't know what to do about this or how to even start a conversation, we could talk about the characters in the novel and what they're feeling or what they're dealing with. And that also opens up conversations that we can have about what they're feeling.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I I wanted to acknowledge the fact that with every adoption, as much as that is such a celebrated thing, there is a mourning that goes
Mhm,
along with that,
mhm.
and there's a heaviness there on on everyone's part, everybody who's involved
Yeah,
in it, the mother and the father who weren't able to take care of the child, the grandparents, the child themselves. I mean, it really has potential to be a very long lasting traumatic experience, and we do the best we can to focus on the positives. But you're right, like there's a lot of layers there. So
yeah.
yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to look at Jenny's story. I have
Yeah,
not read that one,
Jenny B.
so I'll have to
Jones,
check it
it's,
out.
the Katie Parker series. In Between is the first book. It's definitely a great one that I
And
would
I'm sure she
definitely
brings
recommend.
lots of laughter to that too, knowing
Oh,
her
it's so
writing
fun. Oh,
style.
yeah, absolutely, yeah. Mad Maxine's the grandma in the book, and the girl in the book, Katie Parker, hates the parents, well, at the beginning. But Mad Maxine, you cannot hate her, and they'll even say now their favorite character is Mad Maxine. So they love that humor in books too, which is so great. So, okay, so The Road Before Us, you've written other books.
Mhm.
Tell us about some of those for those who may not have heard of you or have picked up one of your books. They're like, ooh, this sounds really good. And what else does she write?
Yeah. So, my first books were, they were strictly romance, again with the heavier topics, but less
Hmm.
women's fiction, more romance. And one of the things is even though I live in Ohio, in suburban Ohio, I love traveling to the more rustic areas of
Mm.
the United States. And so my first books were set along the Madison River in Montana, which
Ooh.
again, I grew up vacationing there with my family in these tiny little cabins where the river is going right by, and watching the fly fisher men and women out there. And it's a different side of Montana than you see in a lot of books that are popular. And so I have that series, and then I also have my Whisper Canyon series, which again, small town, small mountain town in Colorado. And then my most recent book before this one is With Every Memory, and that's where I moved more into the women's fiction. And that's an amnesia story about a mother, a father, and their high school daughter who have experienced a tragedy, and they're trying
Mm.
to figure out, okay, what do you do when you lose the one person in your family that held all of us together? And so, again, on the heavier side, but I like to throw in moments of comedy just to try to
Yeah.
lighten it up, when it gets too heavy. But yeah, so this is my sixth book. I've done some novellas here and there with some of our wonderful authors that are in this group. Um, and I did want to pause and say that your group is amazing.
Oh,
I can't
thanks.
believe what you have managed to build here, but it's just, I mean, I just posted a video today because somebody has just released their debut novel, and I have been waiting years for this book to come out. Angela Carlisle, Secondary Target. I've been waiting years for this book to come out since I read an early draft, and I'm like, yes, let's all celebrate her. And I love that you've created a group where we can do that.
And just talk about Christian fiction, and I love when someone says, "I like reading this. What other books or authors do you recommend?" And there's like 400 comments, like within an
Mm.
hour. I just love everyone just loves authors and books and celebrating stuff. And if they say there was one the other day that was the most random thing, I can't even remember. Like, is there a book about this? I can't even remember what it was now. And then there was like 20 books listed. I'm like, I had no idea that there was that many books about that random. Maybe it was like librarians on horseback or so. It was like something like that. It was
Yeah,
like I was like, wow, there's that many books about librarians on horseback. I had no idea. But the
I
avid
know.
readers of Christian fiction, they know, and that's I'm so thankful for my friend Martha. When I thought about starting this, I knew she's an avid reader and read a couple hundred books a year. I'm like, okay, there must be other people out there that read a lot, and they do. They read a lot, and it's so fun to being able to connect with them. And I have read more. I've expanded the types of books that I read from just their recommendations, and yeah, it's so fun.
Mhm. Yes, and I love that it gives us a chance to connect with aspiring authors as well,
Yes.
because there are
Hmm.
so many readers out there that want to learn how to write and have that story, and I love that there are those connections being made as well.
I love that. Okay, so one thing I love to ask at the end is what is a Christian novel that you've enjoyed? So we're talking about recommendations that you would recommend. Well, I guess you already recommended one. So go ahead and
Well,
we can talk about that
yeah.
one and then another one too if you want.
So Angela Carlisle's book, Secondary Target, it's about a girl who witnessed murders within her family years
Mm.
ago and has been living in the witness protection program in Kentucky. And, somebody has discovered who she is and where she is. And it's a romantic suspense. And so you have the person who's trying to keep her safe. And of course, there's attraction there. And Angela is one of the sweetest people I've ever met in my life. Um, she's even this past Christmas, she always so whenever you see her, if you ever meet her at a book event, she's always knitting. And I don't know if it's knitting or crocheting because I'm not that
She's
not
doing
that
something with
creative.
yarn. Yeah.
And she creates these fingerless gloves. And every time I see her, and she'll have a conversation with you and just be, working away, and, like, she's able to be fully in the conversation while doing this.
Wow.
Well, for Christmas last year, just out of the blue, she sent me a pair because I'm always in awe of her talent. She is one of the sweetest people, and so this book is coming out with Bethany from Bethany House, and it's a gem. So I really
Oh,
hope that
fun.
people give this really interesting and page turning story a chance. And then the book that I just finished reading a couple days ago is Rachel Scott McDaniel's Walking on Hidden Wings. Um,
Ooh.
and Bethany Turner and I got to kind of interview her in this like silly, kind of a spoof on real author interviews, and we had so much fun just teasing her about the idea of her heroine being a wing walker in the 1920s and doing these air shows. And it was, of course, there's a mystery. People think she's killed her husband, and she has to figure out who is framing her for killing her husband. And there's a lot of secrets and mystery that I don't want to go too far into because it'll spoil a lot. But oh, it's such a good story. If you love witty banter and
Mm.
just really like snappy dialogue and mysteries that you cannot pinpoint. I'm that suspense reader who's always like,
Yeah,
"Oh,
yeah.
it's that person. I know it's that person." I can never guess who the bad guy is in her stories. So that is another one that I would highly recommend.
Oh, so okay, I'm gonna have to check out both of those, and I think
Mm.
that's the fun thing too, is we get so excited about other people's books, and someone asked me before, like, "Wait, you promote other Christian authors?" I'm like, "Yes," and they're like, "They're your competition." I'm like, "No." Like, we're all cheerleaders for each other. We all get so excited, and I read this, and have you checked out this, and you need to check this, and, yeah, it's so fun. That's what I love about this community, that we can just like, oh my goodness, because we also recognize the talent. Like, we know how hard it is to pull these things off. Like, when you talk about, like, I can never guess who did it, like, that's a lot of work. Like, planting the seeds so that it makes sense, but also being able to, like, have it where it makes sense, but you can't figure it out ahead of time. Like, so good. Like, we know the talent,
Mhm.
and that's why we get so excited. Like, oh my goodness, I love getting caught up in a book. Like, oh, I really love this. Like, Bridger standing in yoga in the elevator. I'm like, "Oh my word, I would never have thought of this character. This is so fun. I cannot wait to be go on this journey." And that yeah, it's fun.
Yes.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah,
Okay,
he's a
so
fun one.
yes. All right, Janine, where can we go to find out more information about you and your books?
So you can always go to my website, JanineRosche.com, JanineRosche. And then I'm on most of the socials. I'm rarely on TikTok, not my favorite. But my book is available at basically anywhere you want to buy books. Before its release date of May 21st, it is, I think, 40% off at Baker Bookhouse. Also,
Yes.
Faith and Life Bookstore in Newton, Kansas has it, and you can find it at all the online places as well. But obviously, it's always great when we can support those smaller, more Christian focused bookstores. So hopefully, people will give it a chance.
Yes, and the title is The Road Before Us. So make sure you check that out. Well, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure to meet you finally.
It was so fun.